Hi, my name's Luke Phillips, and I'm the author of the Beast series of books, as well as the standalone story Rogue, which will hopefully have a sequel very shortly. This is my first ever YouTube video. I thought I'd introduce myself, tell you a little bit about my stories and what I do. My stories can certainly be described as horror stories, monster stories, creature features, all of the above, but also cross-genre in terms of being thrillers, action stories. There are characters who you could certainly say were inspired by some of the action heroes of old. Um, but yeah, they're an interesting mix of stories. I started writing them because I could never find a book that I really wanted to read that had all the story elements that I wanted. So I started writing stories that I liked, that I wanted to read. And I'm very lucky that I've been able to find a readership out there and have some very lovely and loyal fans and readers who regularly stay in touch. You can find me on social media. You can via Black Beast Books, which is the easiest way to find me on Instagram or Facebook. And I thought what I'd do today is give you a little bit of a taster simply by reading the first chapter of my first book, Shadow Beast. Now, Shadow Beast is a story that delves into sort of the mythology of the big cat phenomenon in the UK. You may have heard of famous examples like the Beast of Bodmin or the Surrey Puma. There are even later examples such as the Sydenham Panther, the Stroud Deer Eater, and so forth. They're a regular occurrence and phenomena in the UK media and newspapers, even sometimes making them onto mainstream television. My story explores a story set up in the Highlands of Scotland, which is not only famous for big cat sightings, but has one of the most famous ones, which is the case of Felicity Puma, which was a mountain lion, a female mountain lion, found in the small village of Cannock, near Inverness. And this is where my story is set. That's pretty much all the resemblance it really bears to sort of the real life aspects. The Cannock in my book is probably a slightly bigger village than the small hamlet that Cannock is in real life, which I've been lucky enough to be to. Some of the landscape details are slightly different, although I have borrowed most of the surrounding names of the mountains and so forth. I've just created a landscape and a world where the creatures that are in my book can survive a little bit more easier, and it can accommodate some of the world building that's in the future stories. So without much further ado, I will start reading chapter 1 of Shadow Beast, which would be amiss not to mention is available on Kindle, in paperback on Amazon, but also as an audiobook on Audible and iTunes. So, are we sitting comfortably? If so, let's begin. The creature stopped in the last reach of the shadows of the tall pines and dropped to the ground. It watched a group of stags charge from a tree line 100 yards down, driven in a state of panic and changing direction instinctively as they went. Their feet pounded the earth and sent trickles of stone and mud sliding down the steep slope as they moved across it. It felt the vibrations under its feet and sensed the urgency with which they moved. The deer kicked their feet high to avoid the strewn boulders and scrub of the mountainside. It watched as their eyes darted back to the darkness beneath the trees to search for their pursuer. Their nostrils frothed in exhaustion, but as they stopped to snatch a few life-giving breaths, the leader of the group let out a strained bellow as he expelled the air from his lungs and continued on. The creature licked its nose as the wind brought the sticky sweet must of the animals towards it. A wave of static energy rippled along its back and across its shoulders like wind on water. It had flanked them without being seen and now lay motionless, its black hide blending into the darkness behind the thick gorse bank where it had sunk down onto the earth. Dawn was approaching, and the night was retreating to the west. It watched still, taking deep, slow breaths that inflated its lungs to full capacity. The oxygen-rich mountain air, the fuel for the coming charge. Its paws rested on soft, dew-drenched earth and budding heather that would silence the heaviest of footfalls. It waited, panting soundlessly as its silver whiskers warned it of micro-changes to the direction of the wind and air pressure, as the distance between it and its prey narrowed. It allowed a twitch of frustration to flick through its tail as the deer changed course again and headed down the hill instead of towards it and the tree line. It rose slightly and continued its journey along the knotted and twisted branches of the thickly entwined gorse. Not in flower yet, the bank provided a dark and dense veil of branches to hide behind. Its movement was snake-like, its head naturally rising and falling as it followed the cover and the deer, its pelvic and shoulder muscles pumping together as it accelerated and slowed to match the pace of its prey. At the end of the gorse bank, it came to the welcome shadow of trees again and disappeared within their darkness. Here, it moved more cautiously, walking on stones and roots or flicking away the dry branches that lay in its path. Then it paused. The sweaty, ripening must of the deer was intoxicating now, and it knew they were close, even though it could not yet see them. Ahead of the creature was a small, earthy bank that marked the boundary of the wood it had entered. This led to a sparse, grassy knoll that bordered a long, straight river of stone along the valley. It knew that rather than cross the stone river, the deer were more likely to hesitate and turn back to the trees with the coming dawn. It crept towards an opening on the bank between an oak and a pine, their intertwined boughs locked in a centuries-old battle for the light that formed a natural arch. The bank was steep and the creature paused, calculating its approach. It slunk down onto its belly and used the exposed roots of the oak as a stepway up the bank. It hunkered down, coiling its hindquarters beneath it and stretching its neck and head forward. Its whiskers bristled as they sensed the changes in air pressure and the breeze moved around the animal coming towards it. From the shadows it watched as the stag approached closer, and it once again licked its nose and muzzle in anticipation. It repositioned itself slightly forward for better purchase and inhaled one last time. Silence fell upon the wood. The stag was stung by the sudden quiet and snapped to attention as it peered towards the darkness. The creature saw its moment and burst from the shadows, barreling forwards in a furious and fluid sprint that silently engulfed the ground between it and the leader of the herd. In its final bound, it launched into a headlong leap, claws outstretched for a murderous embrace as it let out the thunderous roar that it built in its chest. In a microsecond, the creature knew its initial attack would fail. It had leapt too soon and too high to hit from the side as expected. It collided with the stag head-on, and gravity and the slope of the knoll did the rest, as both it and its prey tumbled backwards in roars and bellows of displeasure and panic. Instinct took over, and it slashed upwards with its right paw as it slithered backwards in the wet grass, losing the poor purchase it had momentarily gained on the stag. It lunged forward again, hissing in anger as it glanced at the other stags that had bolted in fright back up the hillside, but now stood motionless, waiting for the great play yet to come. The stag lowered its head, thrusting its antlers towards the creature. It kicked up the ground with its back legs and grunted through its nose in aggressive defiance. Its body began to shake as the deep cut on its chest began to seep. The creature uttered a purr-like rumbling growl as it padded forward. The stag reared back in panic, but then brought its antlers down towards its attacker again, but the creature was too swift for it. It batted the stag's head sideways with a clip of its paw and dashed forward to meet the exposed throat, opening its maw and biting down into the flesh. As it felt the taut-skinned puncher in its vice-like grip and its throat was stung by hot air and bubbling blood, the creature savagely snapped its head sideways, throwing the stag to the ground. Its claws raked downwards through the stag's neck and shoulder like iron pins. It calmly watched the other deer flee in panic towards the trees, never releasing its hold on the stag, even as it bucked in final futile spasms against death. It saw its own green eye reflected in the amber one beneath it, and watched ever patient as the last life spark went out. As the body beneath it slumped, the creature relaxed its hold and began to feed. So that was the first chapter of Shadow Beast. I hope you liked it. Bear with me as I get used to producing YouTube videos and hopefully bring you some more. But as I say, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see you follow. I'd love to see you buy my books. Take care for now. Bye-bye.